Good morning. My name is Jen. I'm with Crestwood. I wanted to welcome everybody to our webinar today. Today we are going to be talking about some advanced topics with Management Reporter. Our presenter for today is Mike Gordon. Mike is one of our project managers at Crestwood. He is also a CPA, and he's been in the public accounting area for about 14 years. Working with lots of different financial report writer tools for approximately 16 years, so he has lots of experience in this area. Currently, Mike has worked with GP for the past 6 years and is one of our in-house gurus on Dynamics GP. If you do have questions during today's session, please feel free to type them into the questions area in your GoToWebinar tool pane. And either we will try to get those answered right away, or we will make sure that we answer those at the end. We'll leave some time for questions and answers. Also, after the webinar today, there will be a short survey that pops up on your screen. If you could please take just a minute and fill out those questions, we do appreciate that. So on that note, I'd like to turn things over to Mike Gordon from Crestwood. Thanks, Mike.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I have up our agenda that we'll be covering today, and it should be similar or exact to what you have, but we'll be walking through using the report wizard, a forecast report, and I'll kind of demo both of those. We'll review a statement of cash flows and what goes into that. It's a little trickier of a statement. We'll talk about bringing spreadsheet information in and consolidations in general, and then generating reports. And then we also have a couple of screenshots on there, Management Reporter Security. So with that, I'm going to flip over to Management Reporter. And the first thing we're going to do is look at this little report wizard here. So there's icons up under the help on the toolbar. And if you click on the report wizard, this is just a fast automated way to click on a report. So I have different reports I can use, and then what do I want to create, actual or budget. I'm actually just going to create a quick balance sheet here. So if I click next, it allows me to determine what accounts I want and what section I want these to go in. So if I was going to do cash and short-term investments, I would start with cash and go down to cash suspense, hit the shift key so that I highlight everything, add it in, and then if I pick my next section, other current assets, I could take accounts receivable through that and put that out there, as well as doesn't look like they actually have an inventory section on that. So we'll take fixed assets as well. Sorry, everything but fixed assets. So up to prepaid insurance. And then we can grab our property, plant, and equipment. And I'm hitting the control key now. And then I'll grab our accumulated depreciation, and you'll notice that it knows what we've grabbed on that side. And then I can go to other assets and grab that. And then our current liabilities. And again, with this demo data, it just has a lot of data here. And we grab through that and add it. And then our long-term liabilities. And our stockholders' equity. Looks like it didn't take a couple of things, so I'm just going to go back and add those. And our accumulated. And then we're ready to just add our net income at the bottom, which is pretty much everything else. And then it kind of shows you the breakout of the account numbers and your statement. And I'll tell it to shade my total lines. It kind of gives you an idea of what it's going to do. And then, do I want one report for the entire company? Did I want a tree where I have division, department, account category? We'll just create one report without a tree. We'll just call it Wizard Report. And we'll let it default to the period that it's in, and then we'll just finish. And there's our report. Hopefully there's some data with this because it's demo data, but we'll generate it and see what it does. And there's an example of our report. So that's a quick way to create a report. Looks like I might have clicked that twice, and I'm going to save that report. So, and we'll take questions at the end if anyone has that. The next thing I want to talk about is how you could create a report with forecasts. And that's really all done within the column definition. I don't know that we actually have one, so I'm just going to go in there and create it. But basically, we need a description column in the first column. And then we would have our months. And I'm just going to create a section of this. And maybe make this right here, budget. And there's a print control here, which we can use. So if I drop down to this says print only if the period is equal or less than the base period. And we're going to change the period, so that's 1. And that's really not necessary because you're not going to have budget for 1. That's 2. This would be budget, and that's also period. That's period 2. That's period 2. That would be actual in period 3. Budget in period 3. Actual in period 4. We'll just do one more column. Actual in period 5 and budget in period 5. And this would actually be the same if that's less than the base period. And then here on the budget, you would put if it's greater than the base period. And we have a little document that we'll send out with this. This actually should be my budget. So what this tells Management Reporter is on any of the budget columns, it'll only print if it's greater than the base period. The base period is the date you're running the report for. So if I ran this report for March, I would get the 3 months of actual, and then from April on, it would ignore the actual column and pick the budget column. So if you put all 12 months in here and then comment on the calc formula, just say A:(H) in this case, Management Reporter is going to know how to format that, and then it's going to be interactive based on the report date that you pick. And I'm not going to go through all of it and stay, well, I'm not going to go through all of it and save it because it'll take too much time. But the concept that I want you to come away with is that these print controls can help you get a forecasted report. So I could have, say, 5 months of actual and 7 months of budget and come up with a forecasted total. So this would be forecasted. So right, that's a combination of our actual and budget. And this would be actual. And this would be budget. So how would I get the headers to work? I actually could spread this from whatever the first actual is to, in this case, we'll say Gene is not going to like that because that's there, and this should go from D to believe it's base +1, but I'm not sure about that. And this may have changed from FRS, but this was like base. Oh, no, that did it. So you spread this from whatever that first column is to base, because your base period based on this, you're always going to print the actual if it's less than or equal to the base period. And for the budget, you're only going to print that if it's greater than the base period, so the base period +1. So that's how you get the headers to flow across properly, as well as the other information here. And then I would just save this. It doesn't like my formula here. And Management Reporter will tell you what it doesn't like if I can hover over it. Column A, that's why. It's B to H, so it knows that that's a comment column. And now I should be able to save this. And we'll call this forecasted. And that's really the only difference. You would have the same row definition. If you had a tree, you'd have the same tree. This is what would control what columns it's using and what periods it's pulling. Next thing we had on our agenda was a statement of cash flows. I'm going to expand the default reports and pull up the cash flow report they have. And the key, there's a couple of keys to the cash flow. Everything should work correctly based on, they're using account categories now. They're trying to show off that you can now use an account category that's predefined in your GL package, whether that's GP or SL. But the only difference would be you would just have your account numbers listed here. So this is a typical cash flow. The issues come in when you get down to the cash at the end and the beginning of the period. You need a modifier on the row that says I only want the beginning balance, and on the ending cash I only want the ending balance. And you'll see that we have that row non-printing and then have a formula calculating that. So real quick, I'm going to also go look at, I'm going to flip windows and go back to the main report and pull up our column. And the difference with the column is you have 4 columns, 2 of them non-printed. They're used for calculations only. And you'll see we have our year-to-date beginning balance and then our year-to-date. The year-to-date minus the year-to-date beginning balance gives us our net change or our year-to-date change. This is our monthly change in this column. So if I flip back to our row, so this is saying column B in our row equals B1180, so using that row. So whatever our cash accounts were for column B, so if I flip back to our column now, so column B is our monthly. And then column E equals C1180. So again, the same row, but using the parameters for column C, which is our year-to-date. But place it in row E. So if I go back to the row again, so I want to place it in column E, but using the parameters from column C. So that's the only tricky thing with the cash flow. And then they just have a check total down here if there's a difference, and this also uses a modifier. And normally I have the same formula. They don't, but normally I have the same formula on the ending cash. And there is one other thing that we definitely need to do, and that's back on the tree. I'm actually going to go to settings and show you that we're calculating. Normally it flips. So you normally calculate the row, the column first and then the row. I'm going to just grab one of these other ones. I think I said that right, but I'm just going to grab another report really quick. So normally it's perform row calculation first and then the column. Because of the way the cash flow works, this is actually perform the column calculation first and then the row. And again, that relates back to what we're telling it to do with this calculation so that that works. So it's a little one of the management reporter trickier reports. It was a similar calculation in FRX for anyone that did the cash flow there. The biggest difference is you used to say B1180. Now you actually need a period between it to identify it. So that's all there is to cash flow. Just going to close out of our other window here. So we're back on our main window. And let's talk about Excel and Management Reporter. So if I go to my income statement default, I did a little bit of work on this. There's two places, especially if you have a reporting tree. And I'm going to shift a little to the right. So I have two columns here. And how did I create those? There's this little link button in row links. And first I'm going to relate this to Excel, and then I would tell you what I would do if we had multiple companies with different charts of accounts that I was trying to consolidate. So if I click on this link button, you'll see that we have a financial dimension link, and then I have a worksheet link. And you notice it says defined in a reporting tree. So if I go look at my reporting tree, you'll see that I have one line here that we have to tell it what row it's using. And then that's my financial dimension link. And that is my worksheet link. And that is my Excel file link. Now you'll notice it's UNC path, so it's / server. It likes to have that. It prefers UNC. I have seen it work the other way, but sometimes there's problems. And then I'm going to actually take you out to the configuration console where management reporters kind of set up. There's this service account here. There's two services that actually work in conjunction with management reporter. There's the application service and the process service. The process service needs access to this Excel file from a security standpoint. If it doesn't have access to the folder where that is, you're going to wind up having issues. So let's go back to that. So this is where you would define that. Now, if I flip back to our row, the other thing I want to talk about is what you could do with that link. So one of the things you could do, and anyone that's done this in FRX, it's still very similar. So I pointed at a particular cell for that column. And I just had an Excel sheet out here that related to units sold, which really doesn't necessarily relate, let me get rid of that, to that report. But you'll notice I had A7/CPO. What does that stand for? CPO stands for column period offset. A7 stands for the line, so I want retail. And then based on my date, so for calendar year, and I'm running this for June, Management Reporter is smart enough when it sees that command, CPO, to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it knows what number to pull. Conversely, you could also have a sheet where you use row period offset. So that would be as if your information was vertical instead of coming across. Same concept, it's going to count down. So again, just to reinforce, we set up a link to an external worksheet. Back in the tree, we told it what our worksheet link was, and if I didn't need a financial dimension on that, I didn't necessarily have to add it. You see, I could just put the worksheet link here and copy this down. And then we set it up and told it in the tree where it is, because when it looks at it in the row, that's what it's looking at. Again, when we go back to that link and I click on it, you'll see defined in the reporting tree. Now, what if I'm consolidating and I have multiple companies and I need them in different columns? So in this instance, I would come in and I would say, you know what, I need a new link, and yes, I need it to be financial dimension, and we're going to call this company B. So I'm actually going to delete our other links for the units sold for right now. Now it's not going to want to delete it because I have stuff in the tree. So we'll just ignore that column. So if this was company A and this was company B, and they had different charts of account, I'd be able to do that. The demo environment only has one company here, so I can't really show you that. But say this was, let's grab account instead of division. This cash was 1,100, and that's actually sales, but let's pick the sales account. So we're going to say that's U.S. sales. And then for this company, if it was using a different, delete that, if it was using a different chart, maybe sales was 4,100 and the other one is 4,110. So this is how you could, if they're using the same, you could put the same account in both. And I'm going to save that for right now. And if I come back out to my tree, you'll see now, I need to save this and come back out of it. so that it'll read this. So now if I come back into my tree, I'm now going to see company B. So if I wanted this line to be company B, and this, so this is, looks like it's set up in divisions and departments. So for example, if I wanted the administration department, for whatever reason that's company B, I would just tell it company B, and that's the chart of accounts that it's going to use in combination with that division. So if we had a consolidated tree and it was actually locations as opposed to division, and I don't believe this has location, but let me check real quick. So let's just do a new tree, and I'm going to show you another thing that you can do that we really went over in like the basic management reporter. I can insert reporting units from dimensions. So now it's just got division and department. So we'll look at that other tree, this little T tree here. So if this was locations or companies, let's say that's companies instead of division, I could say, well, you know what, so we're using this summary income statement default is our row, and that's my first one. We use that for that, and then maybe the 300 on whatever, these are different locations, they use the other column in the row. So I've done these where there's at least 4 of them and they work. And what's great about this part is you tell it what that specific, so if that was a location or company, what that's using. Okay, generating reports. We'll go back to our balance sheet report. So generating reports, I'm going to go to this output and distribution. And when I run a report, it goes to, normally it's set like that, and it generates to the management reporter library. So there's a management reporter viewer. So report viewer is our management reporter viewer, and we can have folders and various different things. You can have an external file. I just had that unit sold as an example. And you set security on this as well. This is where the management reporter reports generate to. We're going to go back here. I can also generate to multiple locations. And if this, for example, was, I don't have SharePoint on here to show you, but if this was, for example, SharePoint, you could send a link to this SharePoint folder. You would have to set up SharePoint security to allow access to that, but you could send a link to that folder. Now, you'll notice it says related report link. It is only a link. We've had this come up quite a bit because in FRX, it was the actual report, and whereas you may have needed a drill down viewer, or it could be Excel, but it was the actual report. This is only a link. It's just the way Management Reporter works. It actually links you back to that report library. Now, if I actually was in the report library, say I generated a report, and we have a couple out here, so I'll just use these. Let's see if there's anything I generated today. So we generated, I'll actually look at a side-by-side balance sheet that I'm going to pull up. So if I pull up this report, here's the report. From there, I can export to Excel. I just click on this. And I'm going to say I want a single worksheet. Let's see if we can open the workbook. And let's see if that'll generate. And it did. And just like that, it's out to Excel. Now you'll have to do some formatting. You'll see on the right here, this stuff's off to the side. So if I go to View and like Page Break, I can just drag this out. And now it's on one page. And either go back to my page layout or normal. And that would be your report. It says what the report is. There's also a date and time on here. So after you run it and generate it to the library viewer, you can export it. The other things that I want to tell you about reporting and generating reports is I can set, I'm just looking at time here, so I actually had some screenshots on there talking about that. Security is the last thing. Okay, we should have time. You can set up report groups. Let me close out of here. So report groups, I actually have one that I created called test reports. So it's got a balance sheet and an income statement default. So I can also set group distribution. So right now it's going to this folder in the library. And it's using the report group location. So if I ran that, both reports should run to that library. The other thing I can do is schedule the reports. So I actually set up a test schedule. So this says I can either run an individual report or a group. And it just gives who's the owner and what their permissions are, because I would need permissions to run it. And I'm running this daily starting at 8:19, 9:50 a.m. every day, and it ended by 9:19. So this would have run for a month. But you can set up the reports to run automatically. So anybody that either has some performance issues or you just have reports that are huge, you can run them overnight and they'll go out to that report library. The other thing I wanted to talk about, the last thing we had as a topic, was security. So I'll do it off this other tree here. In the tree, well, there's a couple of different things with management reporter security. How you set up users is it's based on your network login. So these are all Crestwood users. And then you can give different rights to the user. So these all are administrator, but I'll pick on her for right now. I could say she's a designer, and then she gets rights, and you'll notice that not all companies are accessed. So I either have to create a group for access or give her access to the companies available. I could also make her a generator, so now you can generate reports, drill down to the transaction level, and you can export building blocks, or a viewer, which basically means you can just view reports in that library. The second part of this is you still have to have a valid user that logs into GP. It kind of does all this seamlessly. So now, if people have access to design a report, they have access to all reports. It doesn't let you get that restrictive. You could change company access, but not the actual report level. Same thing with a generator. The difference there is they can generate all reports, again, restrict company access. And same thing on a viewer. Administrator actually has everything. However, in the report library, on your viewers, we'll go to the report viewer, I can set up folders. Public, you don't want to publish anything really to that folder unless you want everyone to see it, because everyone has access by default. But if I click permissions, you'll see the everyone uses just standard part of that. These other folders and a library itself, I can assign what users can go into that folder. So the other thing that we need to talk about is back in Report Designer, now I have a report, and on a specific report, I can assign security at the branch level of the tree. So how I would do that is there's unit security here. So in administration, I go to users and groups, and I say, okay, she gets this report from this level. Now, once I assign this, nobody else has access to it. So I'm going to give myself access to that as well. So I'm going to expand that a little bit so you can see this. So right now, those two users have access to that, to administration. Well, actually, that was the summary level. I'm going to move that down to administration. And then accounting, I'm going to say a different user and myself have access to that. So this is how you can set security within a tree. What'll happen in the report is when they click on one of these branches that they don't have access to, it's going to say that they don't have security to view the information. I don't remember the exact wording, but that's the essence of it. So, and if it sees no security, it's going to assume that everyone has access. The minute you assign security, nobody has access. So that's how you can control security within a report. And then again, I have report library permissions, which I can go to from in here as well. And if I assign somebody at this top level, it'll propagate down to these other levels. The one last thing I wanted to show you, which is not security related, which is not security related, is back in the report viewer. I get asked this question a lot. When these reports are run, so we'll look at, see if I ran this more than once. If I right click and go to Show Versions, you'll see this report was actually run twice. Even though you only see one version, it stores however many times you run it. Now that can be beneficial, or you could be having too much data there that you don't need. You know, maybe there were changes, so you can delete those. The other thing here is you'll see there's a naming convention kind of to these folders. Because of the way Management Reporter sorts, the library sorts numeric and alpha, as you see. So if I put 01 of 2014, and then if I put 1 of 2014, sorry, not 01, and 10 of 2014, they're going to sort right after each other. So I've taken it kind of this naming convention because they line up. We have some clients that actually publish their reports for directors or certain management levels, so they can look at this at any time. As long as you are behind your firewall for your network, you can access this from the outside. It's as long as you have an install, as long as it can see your network and you're not restricted by anything. We have people access us from the outside as well as the inside. And again, you'd have to like VPN into your network. But people have reports out there so management can go back and look at anything at any point in time. And it helps a little bit, the transaction detail reports. Let's see if I have a trans detail report just to show you real quick, and that'll be the last thing that I'm showing you guys this morning. Trend. Let's just take our income statement default. And we do have periodic and year-to-date. So, and it is set to financial account and transaction. This might error out on us because I added those other columns. Okay, so if I went to salary expense, doesn't look like that has what I want, but typically you drill down and it would have, yeah, it's not set up for that, but it would have transaction detail, but it really just looks at like your general ledger. The other thing that you need to do is if we're using these links, and I didn't do it, but if you're going to use more than one link or use a link in the tree, you need to check this use row definition from reporting tree off. That was that error message I got when I ran that, but that's what you would need to check, use row definition from reporting tree. And let's see if I missed anything on our agenda. Doesn't look like it. So with that, Jen, if you're still there, you can open it up for questions.
Sure, Mike, thanks. I have a couple questions. Going back to the report security, one of the questions was, can you give a user access to the top level and then a specific report under it? Or I'm sorry, a specific reporting, I'm sorry, I've said that wrong. Can you give a user access to the top level and then a specific reporting unit under it?
No, once you give them access to the top level, so if we go back to that tree, this top level is a roll-up of everything. So once you give them access to this, they're going to need access to everything, or you're going to get an error that it's not going to run.
Okay.
You know what? let's try that because this was running. Let me just do it over here. Because if you've assigned security to all these, I don't think it's going to run, but Jen, if you can let me know who that is, I'll test it offline. But I think what I said is correct. It's not going to like it because all these other units are restricted, right? If they just have admin and summary of all units, all the others are restricted. So the top level is not going to be able to calculate.
Okay, I have a little bit more information on that. The specific example is that they'd like the management team to have access to the consolidated report and then their specific division.
Right, I can take a look at that offline if you get me that information and who that question was from, and I'll get back to them.
No problem. Okay, one other question then. This was earlier on in the presentation. How do you create a financial dimension link where the other company has a different database?
A different database. I don't know. Get that information as well because I don't know that that's possible when there's a different database.
Okay.
We have multiple companies up here available, and then we actually have in our report definition, I'll go back out to just the main report. Actually, I think I still have that open. Out here, you select a company. It may work with the @any, but I have to check on that. So get that information.
He did mean
user also.
He did mean by different database. He meant a company name.
Okay, if it's not a different database, this @any should work. And it's actually what you really would have is, I'm going to leave that at 2, but in this tree here, right here is the company. So I could say that was from the test company. It's not going to do that, and it's not going to like that because that isn't really set up out here. But that's how I could dictate if it was a specific line that was from a different company. If you're talking in the row, let's go back out here real quick. The row, you would just have those two. So if I scroll to the right here where I set up the extra columns and ignore the Excel one, you would have, this could be company A and this could be company B, which is kind of what I had on there. The chart of accounts, it'll know what to pull in from by when we go back to the tree. And not the Excel, but here's company B, here's company A, and then here's where you define the company. If that didn't answer your question, just let Jen know and get me more specifics, and I'll try to test it and get back to them with specific information.
Okay, thanks, Mike. The last question that I see in the list is back on reports again. Can the drill down be restricted by user? They have the report set up to drill down to the transaction level, but there are some users we would not want to have that access.
No, if it's set to, here's your report setting again. Here's your report setting again. Back on this matrix. This is what controls that. So if that's there, every user is going to have that. Now, if you were talking back on the tree where you can restrict security, you could restrict it for a branch. But if the report's run with transaction, then it's run with transaction.
Thanks, Mike. Well, great. Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone, for attending. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Mike. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.